Good evening, everybody. We're so excited that you're here for our Redox Nurse Talk tonight, and we have an amazing guest tonight that we're so excited to hear from, Dr. Lee Ostler. Sorry, I can't get the words out tonight. So, welcome, and we're going to listen to him. We're going to skip our video tonight, that little short introduction video, because I think Dr. Ostler can tell us everything we need to know about redox signaling. So, first of all, I want to state our disclaimer. So, redox molecules do not diagnose, treat, or cure any disease. They just give the body what it needs to help itself heal by increasing that cellular communication throughout the body. So that's our disclaimer. And again, we never say that this will actually treat or cure anything, but we just know what the body needs, and it works well. So that being said, I'm a nurse here in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm a hospice nurse, and when I came across this technology, it was, I had some health challenges, some autoimmune issues I was going through. So it has helped me tremendously with that. But the business side kind of got me peaked because of the opportunity and the way this works. And it fulfills my passion because as a nurse, I want to help people improve their health. And if there's anything I can do, and if it can make them healthier and at the same time maybe improve their financial status as well. So it was a win-win for me. It had hit all the boxes, and so that's why I'm doing it. I've been on the product for about 4 years now. But I want to turn this over to my co-host, Doria Stewart. She is a nurse in Atlanta, and I appreciate her doing this. This was her idea, so we kind of teamed up. We're cross lines, so neither one of us benefit from anything of the other person, but we're just friends. We met about 4 years ago, maybe Doria, 3 years ago, and we just started doing this, and it's just been successful. It's been successful in the fact that we've met so many people and we've heard so many testimonials of how this has helped people and with the products. So we just want to share it. So Doria, I'm going to give it to you, and then you can introduce Dr. Lee as well.
Thank you, Cindy. I appreciate that. So I have been on the product for 4 years. I actually was introduced to this technology by a very dear friend of Dr. Lee Osler's, who also is a renowned dentist here in Georgia. And when it was first brought to me, I didn't really understand it, but I was willing to take a deep dive at it because I trusted him as a friend. And so when I did my deep due diligence into PubMed, looking at redox signaling molecules and how it affects all the systems in our body, it was a no-brainer for me to say yes to this. The other piece of that is I must also due to retire in the first probably 2 years later. And so I saw this as a side income for residual income to be able to benefit from. And at the same time, being able to help people, because as nurses, that's what it's all about. We've always been, our heart is to help as many people as we possibly can. And this is the way to do it. And I must say, being a nurse for 42 years at the bedside, I believe that our healthcare system is failing us because they're really just looking at symptoms and not the root causes. So that's why this redox signaling technology is so exciting to me, because it's really helping a lot of people. So thank you. All righty. So I now have the extreme pleasure to introduce Dr. Lee Ostler. He's you could say he's my business associate, but he's also a friend. And Dr. Lee and his wife, Stephanie, live in Richland, Washington. He's a proud father of 5 and has 20 grandchildren whom he loves and loves spending time with. I'm going to read a little bit about his bio because I think it's important for you to know this. Dr. Lee Ostler graduated with a bachelor's degree in biology and zoology with an emphasis in biochemistry and physiology from Brigham Young University, and earned his doctorate of dental surgery degree from the University of Washington School of Dentistry. His general dental practice has an emphasis on advanced cosmetic dentistry, bite rehabilitation, periodontal and oral systemic health management, dental sleep medicine, and TMJ and craniomandibular therapy. He received his advanced training at the Las Vegas Institute for Advanced Dental Studies and has been an instructor there as well. He established redoxmatters.com, which I believe was Redox Dentistry before, but he has a vast amount of videos on there from CFI, which a lot of you have seen on Friday evenings, and a wealth of other information. He is a founding member and past president and executive board member of the American Academy for Oral Systemic Health, an international organization focusing on co-management of oral systemic healthcare for healthcare professionals. He founded and operated an education and consulting company teaching healthcare professionals the science and practice of oral systemic health principles. He is founder and program chair for the Eastern Washington Medical Dental Summit, and it's an annual gathering of physicians, dentists, and allied care professionals. He's written several books other than the ones that we all probably know about that consist of the co-management of patients relative to various specialty areas such as oral health, including oral systemic health, TMJ disorders, obstructive sleep apnea, and biological dentistry. He is a co-host on Discover SIA that airs on Friday evenings. He also sits on our professional medical board with the SIA as a volunteer. And I just found this out, he was a subject in a documentary titled Bridging the Gap, which highlights his work. He has recently authored 3 incredible books. And, when I was thinking about it, your history of your study in biochemistry, I believe, laid a foundation for you and was a stepping stone for you writing these books. So Redox Matters, connecting the dots between redox biology and health, which he's going to touch on these a little bit later. Healthy Matters, applying the redox lifestyle, and Why It Matters. So you can find these on his website on redoxmatters.com, or you can go to Amazon to purchase those. So Dr. Lee, again, it's an honor to have you on Nurse Talk this evening. So most of the people that are on this Zoom this evening are some professionals, healthcare professionals, some are lay people. So what I'd like for you to do now is just we share with us what redox is and why is it important.
Well, Dory and Cindy, thank you for inviting me to be on, and I'm thrilled to, be with you this evening. This has been it's fun to watch, allied groups get together to forward the action, to think it through, and to support each other. And you're right, the things that we do in our life are all stepping stones for where we go. And I look back and think that had any of those not occurred, I don't know that I'd be here. The doors just seem to close and open, and they build on the foundation, where we've been. And that's certainly been the case with me. Let me just start with this. I want this to kind of go where y'all want it to go. In the chat room, people can put questions if they want to ask some specifics. We can kind of respond to that and weave that in. So I'm open to answering questions. I don't want this necessarily to be a monologue at all. So for me, this started probably 4 or 5 years ago with my wife. It wasn't my story, it was her story. She's been sick for 40 years. To the healthcare professionals that are on the call or who are listening to it, you might appreciate that, what Cushing's is, that she's had pituitary tumors and surgeries, and has lost her adrenal glands. And so, that's a very life impacting, life affecting, life altering set of circumstances. And we've kind of been everywhere, and certainly throughout the Northwest, Portland, Seattle, and other centers, trying to find help for her. And you're never the same afterwards. And so we just kind of learned to live with our morbidities. And anyway, the physician that we had at the time suggested that we consider getting her on redox signaling molecules. And he wouldn't tell me what they were. He just said to go Google it and find some and get some. I don't think he was involved. He just heard about this from his neighbor, across the fence. And truth be known, I think he was scratching his head trying to figure out what to do with this poor woman and this desperate man, was trying to find some solutions. And anyway, long story short, we did find some. I'm going to share my screen for a moment here and show you a picture of her. Can you see that? So this is a picture. This was the earliest picture before October when we met with her physician, and he made that recommendation that we could find. So that was her before. Not much happened between April and October. But in October, our life kind of changed when he said, do this. So we got her on redox molecules. October 25th was the date she started. And this picture on the right is in December when we had an opportunity to go on a date. You want to come in with me? You want to join us?
Yeah.
She just walked in the room, so I'll let you actually meet her.
Good.
Anyway, this was 5 weeks right here, and this is what got my attention. So let me unstop here. So she didn't know this was happening, so she just kind of peeked in to see what I was up to. Come on over here. So this is my wife, Stephanie. This was 5 years ago that you saw those pictures. She still had some ups and downs. You want to say anything? I was just kind of telling your story.
Go ahead and tell it.
We went on that date. She said, I'm feeling good enough to go on a date. And so we're standing at the concessions booth in the theater, and I looked over at her and I thought, my goodness, this is really cool. It's like, so I took a picture of her. I didn't think that this was going to go anywhere. And, and we put it up next to the before, and we have now got the before and after. And so, the rest, as they say, is history. She still has her ups and downs, but it's been remarkable to know what these molecules have been able to do for her in terms of restoring her health. We spent periods of time over the last 20 years where like one period of time stretch went like 10 years where she was basically sedated in bed, on round the clock pain meds and sedatives and whatnot, just to help manage some of her issues. And in and out with all the comorbidities that go along with something like this. And so when this came along and was able to give her some semblance of life and energy and, her thinking ability back and her ability to get up and be doing, crafts, which is her love. She's a very crafty, artistic person. So she was able to start doing that and get back into, making dolls and painting and sewing and so forth. And so that's a remarkable story. Anything else you want to add?
No.
I think I've caught her flat-footed here.
Yeah.
So we're going to dive into science. You can hang around if you want.
Well, Stephanie, I want to add, it's such an honor to finally meet you on Zoom. I was, hoping I'd meet you face to face, and I just love the story. I mean, for you to live that long, and I mean, for you to suffer that long, and then I understand that you took the product, and then within 48 hours you were better. I mean, you were different. Can you just explain share with us what that was like before that happened, and then after 48 hours, what was going through your mind, or your thought, your emotional status, mental status? What was that like?
Then I was on 90 milligrams of Oxycontin a day. So I was basically in bed all day. And then I took this SIA and I got up, started doing crafts.
Yeah,
Huge difference.
she was able to wean herself off of, it took us a while, but we were able to get her off, almost all of her pain meds and her sedatives and, all the supporting meds. I mean, she has a few still, but it's more just kind of the ancillary. It's not the hardcore stuff anymore.
Right, right.
So it's really about getting your life back, having
I'm
things.
sure. I'm sure. There is a testimony that you shared, and I know you about her eyes. If you could share that with us, about her. You remember what that? I don't want to give it away, but she was mentioned something about her eyes, and you said, "Oh, you were talking about like what now or something like that." Can you share that
Well,
story?
she's had, photosensitivity and eye sensitivity, eye pain for a long time. Her lacrimal glands, the tear glands, and so forth have been compromised, I think, through all this. Anyway, we'd gone through a lot of doctor's appointments and ophthalmologist appointments, and but anyway, we started ASEA, and within a week or two or three, I don't remember the time interval, we also have this eye thing going on. Anyway, she's made the comment. She goes, "I think I need to go back and see the ophthalmologist because there's something happening with my eyes. There's these dark lines. I'm concerned something bad's going on." And a few days, you don't get into the ophthalmologist by snapping your fingers. You kind of get in line and have to wait a while. And so I'm thinking, oh, well, we're going to have to get an appointment. It's going to take a while. I'm not quite sure. And so I thought, maybe if I just ignored it, it'll go away, right? That's the guy in me speaking, I guess. Anyway, 2 or 3 days later, she kind of waved me off and she said, we don't need to go see the eye doctor anymore. And I go, well, good, but what's going on? And she goes, I figured out why these dark lines are there. It's because my eyelashes are growing back in. And so, that's when I started to pay attention to all the other things I was hearing from, other inputs of people who said their hair would start growing back, and their eyebrows would come in or whatever. And it's like, it's just kind of a side door testimony that's a minor thing maybe, but it's just it's a validation that when cells start working all over the body, lots of things start self-correcting. And for her, that was one of them. Currently, she still uses tons of eye drops, and it kind of comes and goes, but she is constantly, spraying her eyes with ASEA, with that little spritzer, ASEA bottle. She's always got that in her hand, and she does that, dozens and dozens of times a day to keep her eyes happy. So that was the story back then. It was like, it saved me a trip to the eye doctor because we thought that she was having a bad infection or something with this dark line starting to form around her eyes.
Yeah, I love that story. So, with Stephanie having such quick results and within 48 hours, it was like you said, flipping a light switch. There, a lot of people are on redox and, they're not seeing anything happening. So is that because the molecules aren't working?
No, they always work. Thanks. If you want to. They always work. The whole point of redox signaling is they elevate your cellular function, but it's not like a drug. We have this idea of, well, how do I know it's working? Because I think we have this drug mindset that when I take something that's supposed to produce an effect, like the headache goes away or whatever the reason for taking the medication is, that it'll fix something. Well, that's not what this is. This is cellular health. What we're fixing is cell function, and that's really not something that you can really readily measure. There's no lab tests. There's no quantifiable, outcomes that occur from starting taking it that prove that it's working or not working. And so sometimes people will say, "Well, it didn't meet my expectations, therefore it must not be working." And so this managing expectations thing is an important, aspect to this to consider. It always works at a cellular or subcellular level. It's always got an effect, and we can get into the science in a few minutes if you want. But I just caution people to say, it took you a long time. All disease happens because first cells stop working like they're supposed to. Disease always is a cell problem. And so when I fixed the cell problem, it took a long time for the disease to manifest, for the dysfunction to finally show up. And so it does take a while to, self-correct or auto-correct or, get the cell to work right. And so we have to be patient with that and realize that, you don't just start taking, for example, vitamins and expect all your problems to go away. Like you take vitamin C and you go, well, nothing changed, so it must not be working, right? It's like we don't think that way, but for some reason we do think that way with these kinds of things when we're talking about some of these stories. And the other part of this is that at the cell level, it's everybody has a different set point, right? We call it hormesis. Hormesis has to do in the cell with a slight bit of stress occurring that upregulates or activates pathway genes that turn on adaptive stress response pathways and systems in the body that make us stronger and healthier. And that's not something that turns on a dime and all of a sudden you're strong and healthy. However, having said that, there are so many stories of people who begin supplementing redox molecules and activating these pathways where they do have quick response. My wife was 48 hours. I was a week into it, and I'm thinking, well, I think I'm thinking sharper. I'm thinking sharper. My bowel habits change, my poop changes, and it's like I'm sleeping, so much better. But I'm not sure if that's my own bias, weaving into that. My story was not for another 18 months. So that was late 18 when we started, and I showed you her before and after. So in March of 2020, when we were shut down because of COVID, I decided I had a 2-month break. I'm going to go get my neck and my back looked at because I have back, discomfort and a radiating numbness in my arms and fingers. And that's not really good if you're a dentist, right? So I thought, I'll just go get that fixed. And so I went in and discovered that I was going to have, 7 to 10, 11 levels that will be fused to fix this problem of this stenosis stuff going on. Anyway, I thought, well, that's not going to work, and besides, he looked at me and said, you're not going back to work when we're done. So I thought, well, what can I do? And I've got Jim Glenn kind of in the back of my brain over here saying, well, he doubled his dose and got rid of all his back discomfort. So I thought, what can hurt? So I doubled my dose, and within a week, it's pretty amazing when 99.9% of all of your back discomfort and your radiating paresthesias and numb limbs, it just goes away. And it's been gone since. So I don't necessarily, we made the disclaimer up front. We're not here to treat, diagnose, or cure stuff. But what we can say is from a mechanism of action point of view, the only explanation, and I think I know a thing or two about this, the only explanation is that there's less inflammation. So, and that's one of the interesting pathways. So that was that story.
So you have a visual. So could you show us your visual of how the cells are working? How the molecules are working at the cellular level? Yeah,
yeah, I can. I've got some slides that I use. I've got some slides that I use. In fact, some of them we're going to be using in our. Let me just share my screen. Maybe while I'm doing that, you can ask your question more specifically, so I know which one to call up. What question are you asking specifically?
Basically, I'm a visual learner, so basically just knowing how the cells are communicating with the various systems in the body. Does that make sense?
Okay, well, I'm going to start with this one. Is this okay? Let's I won't get rid of all of them, but can you see that okay?
Yes.
Okay, so in the cell we have redox switches. These are called transcription factors, and a switch is a switch because it can. In fact, let me show you one other slide first. It's called the redox regulatory circuit. So the question is, how does the cell know when it's in trouble? What does it do? What does it do about a problem? Well, first it has to sense or detect that there's a problem. And then it has to communicate or signal or transduct. It has to move something down a pathway such that at the end of that, there is a solution offered that affects a change. We call that the effector, or that it modulates the original signaling problem that was set all this in motion. And in this situation, we're talking about oxidation in the cell. So any problem basically that you can present to me is there because there was first oxidation in the cell. And oxidation is, I'm just going to be hitting around on these. Hopefully this will make sense to you, but we'll try and make an hour and a half presentation in an abbreviated way here. Oxidation happens because electrons are moving. This is the essence of life right here. This one screen right here. There are electrons rotating around the nucleus of our atoms, like planets around the sun, and they're in electrical balance from an electrical charge point of view. But when this system loses an electron or gives an electron or has an electron stolen by another adjacent molecule that is more energetic or more electronegative, and it steals that electron away, I now have an imbalance, and it creates an oxidized or energetic molecule. Well, it is this imbalance or this movement of that electron that is the essence of everything that we're talking about. And so when there's oxidation, that means I have molecules and atoms in my cell that are missing these electrons, and they're looking for to be balanced. And so something signals, something triggers, and we call those transcription factors. In this case, this is NRF2, and it doesn't mean anything super mysterious. That's just the name of it. And when this switch or this transcription factor becomes activated, it moves or translocates to the gene or the DNA, where it initiates this solution, this antioxidant defense, this cell defense. I mean, we could go on. There's 500 other things that happen, but just they're cell protective. They mount a defense that comes back and corrects the original problem, which is the oxidation that was occurring because of whatever, whether it was radiation or toxicity or something toxic in the environment or whatever. And so the point is that this NRF2 is the redox switch. And so that switching thing goes on and turns these processes on. Well, so let me find another slide here that we'll just kind of skip to it. And that's this one. And so here you have this NRF2 and this NFKB, and those are the two switches. The NRF2 in the green, when it is activated, you can follow the green arrow there, it initiates cell defenses, but when the NFKB side is activated, it initiates inflammation. And which path it goes down is a function of how much or how little of this oxidation stimulus is occurring in the cell. And so this is probably, kind of the pivotal the pivotal thing, and it's because of this principle that we mentioned earlier, hormesis. When there is too much of something or too little of something, it activates NFKB. They're in the red. When I have the Goldilocks amount, the just right amount of whatever that stimulus is or that thing going on, then it activates a different pathway, and that's the cell defense or the NRF2 pathway. That is the transcription factor or the switch. This is the science behind this. In other words, the same agent, the same condition, the same molecules, the same oxidation can go one of two ways depending on its intensity or amount, or its chronicity, its chronicness, its over time. If it just stays there, we talk about chronic low-level inflammation. Well, it's because there's chronic oxidation occurring in the cell that's turning that inflammation on. So knowing this, and we can then ask this question, with that in the background, if that's the switch, the question is, how do we manipulate it? How can we manipulate it? Is it possible to hack it, to make it do what we want to do? Because this is an adaptive response. And so that's where lifestyle comes into play. And what Healthy Matters, the book, that we wrote, is about, is this idea of, can we create a lifestyle in the way we live, or in the supplements that we utilize, or in the diets that we follow, or in the behaviors that we adopt from a lifestyle perspective? Can we do something that will manipulate the cell to preferentially favor turning on the switches that activate cellular defenses and therefore make me healthy? And indeed we can. And so let me get to my next one here. Let's see if I've got it handy. I might not have it in this slide deck, but I'll find it. I don't. So my point is, this lifestyle, there are a multitude of things that we can utilize that will enable us to be able to turn on the switches that we want to turn on, and to diminish the switches that we don't want to turn on, i.e. inflammation. And that's what redox signaling is all about, because redox is reduction oxidation. When I reduce a molecule, it means I'm adding an electron to it to reduce its energy state to a more balanced homeostasis status. When I am oxidizing something, I'm stripping an electron away from it, which makes it a radical. Now it is high energy, and it wants to solve that problem by taking an electron from anywhere it can. And if it takes it away from the cell membrane or another protein or DNA, it damages that protein, because in a protein, when I start stripping electrons away from it, it destabilizes it and it changes its shape. So now I have fragmented proteins that don't function properly. And so my cell function starts to go down if I allow this oxidation to continue. And so redox comes in and says, well, let's figure it out this way. We need more antioxidants. And the preferential ones are the ones that we make, the inside, the endogenous ones, the glutathione. So if there's something I can do that will stimulate or activate my own production of antioxidants, my own production of glutathione, then I can bring that effector or that solution to the table, and I can reduce or provide an antioxidant or a donor electron to the cell that will stabilize the cell, that will save the cell and make it perform better, function better. The interesting thing is that there are thousands of these redox sensitive switches that respond in this way all through the cell. Anything good that can happen is signaled into motion by this redox biochemistry reaction. And interestingly enough, this is the future of anti-aging. Almost everything that you can bring up that is anti-aging is playing on this landscape, this redox landscape of how do you hack or turn on these pathway genes that promote cell defense, that promote cell repair, that promote cellular rejuvenation, that promote healthy pathway genes activating. Those are the ones that are related to our biological time clocks that reverse the hands of time, as it were, that take aging and stop it or reverse it and make me now more resilient. I'm more adaptive to stress, because we're going to get stressed. We early on, I think, in our ASEA subculture, we kind of thought this was totally and 100% about balance. It was about having or being in homeostasis at all times. And I'm here to tell you that's not the proper way of looking at this. The proper way of looking at this, the better way of looking at this, the better cellular doctrines that undergird all this is not about being in homeostasis. It's about being responsive to stress. When stress occurs, as it will always happen, the question is, how quickly can I respond to it? How quickly can I adapt to it? How quickly can I upregulate a defensive posture to the stress so that I can be at an elevated level of responsiveness or resilience, stress resilience capability going forward, because that's what keeps me healthy. So anyway, hopefully that wasn't too big of a tangent, but
That was incredible. Cindy, did you have a question?
I had just a couple things. He covered a lot of it, actually. So basically, what I'm understanding you say, the NRF2 is basically think my word, so more like a regulator to the cell's defense system against oxidative stress. Is that correct?
yeah. Let me simplify it with this analogy, metaphor. In the room that you're in right now, wherever you're at, if you looked over on the wall somewhere or somewhere in your house, you'll notice there's a thermostat.
Mhm.
And all the houses have thermostats in them, right? And this is a device that measures the temperature or the ambient comfort level that, and it's preset. You know, we let's say you want your temperature in your house to stay at 72 degrees, for example. That's a nice, comfortable thing. So if the temperature or the ambient condition of your home, if that temperature rises to 73 or 75 or whatever, there's going to be a relay that will kick on, or we could say if it dropped to 68, you know, for some reason it was too cold. There's a relay that activates in that device, in that thermostat, that activates a machine somewhere, you know, in your home that turns on a process that will condition the air or heat the air to return the ambient condition in your home to that preset level, whereupon when it happens, it turns off. So it's responsive. Well, that's very much like these switches, these redox switches. These redox switches are sensitive to the level or the degree of oxidation in the cell. And just like that diagram I had on of the two pathways, the one that was red and the one that was kind of green, if I have high levels of oxidation or consistent levels of oxidation happening in the cell, it will turn on the switch that turns on inflammation. If I have a mild, low level, Goldilocks level, just right amount of oxidation occur, it favors and turns on the other switch. So either way I go, it's still a redox switch. And the interesting thing about in the cell is that the cell protective pathways are activated when I can regulate and manipulate a mild amount of oxidation. So the question is, what is it that activates or causes a mild amount of oxidation? And in a lifestyle discussion, we would talk about fasting. We would talk about exercise. We would talk about phytochemicals, phytonutrients, plant derived secondary messengers and molecules that come from nutrition. We would talk about if there's some modalities, we could talk about hyperbaric oxygen.
Like hot saunas maybe, and the cold plunges that people do, the cold plunges, things like that, saunas.
Changes in thermal condition. If you went into a hot sauna or you did an ice bath, those activate what's called heat shock proteins that create oxidation. And so all of these things, all of this nutrition that's otherwise healthy, it's healthy because it's inducing a slight bit of oxidation. Plant phytochemicals, as an example, we think of them as highly nutritious, and they are, but why are they nutritious? They're nutritious because they're toxic. Plant phytochemicals are toxic. They were created that way in the plant because that's the plant's defense mechanism. That's how the plant defends itself in its growing environment, is to create, bitter tasting alkaloids and poisons that in the plant world defend it from its pests and its predators. But when we consume them, they're subtoxic. They produce a slight, mild bit of oxidation in the cell that we then have to respond to in a stress adaptive way by turning on these pathways that activate becoming stronger and creating my endogenous glutathione antioxidants. And so anything that makes me healthier does so because it provides or creates a mild bit of oxidation. Fasting does it because when I fast, I'm reducing glucose levels. That's stressful. When I don't eat and when my glucose levels drop and my glycogen storage is depleted, if that keeps going and I don't do anything about it, I'm going to die. I run out of energy. So the cell knows that when it gets that way, it creates a slight bit of oxidation and it flexes or flips the switch to start burning fats. That's the whole fat burning, keto idea, is that if I just deprive myself of glucose or I can exercise it away, I can start fat burning because the whole process is a mild hormetic insult to the cell that upregulates these survival genes, these longevity genes that make me more stress resilient. That's what exercise is all about. I actually tear myself down when I exercise. It's in rest and recovery when I've activated these genes. And when I have autophagy happening, when that becomes activated, and I'm now eating up the damaged proteins that I created through a bad lifestyle or exercise or whatever, that's when I repair, rejuvenate, and restore. So back to your question, yeah, it's all that switch that is recognizing the problem and it responds to it, and then it turns off. It's responsive.
Well, there was a doctor that I was listening to a podcast. I can't remember his name. I think the last name was Seafried. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He was on with Drew Pruitt. He does a lot of podcasts, but he was talking about, and this is something we need to realize, that health and disease is based on a cellular level. It's based on the cells. So, and he talked about cancer. And again, we don't make claims here related to cancer, but he was talking about cancer occurs because of disruption in oxidative phosphorylation. And it's just getting back, knowing that disease processes and health is based on cell function and cell communication. And if something goes awry or if there's a miscommunication, your cell starts to mutate or whatever, and then it starts to multiply. And things happen long before we, quote, feel things. So even with the redox, when people say they don't feel anything, I always go back to, okay, say if you're taking a statin, which I totally don't agree with, but say if you're taking a statin, do you feel that working? And you don't. You go for months and you won't even know if it's doing anything until you go back to the doctor for a lab result. So like you said earlier, this takes time. We didn't get this way overnight, and anything to build on a cellular level is not going to happen in 3 months or 6 months. Now you may see some changes, but to really get to where you want it, it's a long-term ongoing thing.
Well, it's a lifestyle.
It is, yeah.
And that's the point, is you can't just sit on your couch and drink a redox supplement exercise your remote and think that you're doing yourself any great favors. I mean, it's better than not drinking ASEA in my view, but if you combine that with other things that we just outlined, and I there's 20 or 30 things that we could talk about that you could be doing that would activate these pathways. If you put them all together, it's marvelous. That's why I like cell performance and the whole idea of herbs. I think we probably need a dozen more herbs at least, in our line commercially, but you can just go out and say, I'm going to also add herbs to this. Why? Because those are phytonutrients. Those are phytochemicals that produce secondary metabolites that activate these transcription factors. The whole idea of redox signaling molecules being native in the body has to do with that electron transport chain that you made reference to. That's where they come from. It's the combustion, metabolism, burning, whatever word you want, of glucose. A glucose is plant biomass. The energy is coming from the sun, and the photons are converted through photosynthesis into stored electrons in plant matter, which we then eat. And then instead of burning them in a campfire, the wood in the campfire is just electrons going from reduced wood to oxidized oxygen. The movement of the electrons is what gives off the heat and the energy. Well, in our body, when we take that same plant matter, that glucose, and we chemically metabolize it or combust it, the electrons are moving from its reduced form in glucose or fatty acids, and it's moving over to oxygen. In the process of doing that, we create energy, and we also create the smoke byproducts, if you will, of the combustion called redox molecules. These are leaked electrons and unreduced oxygen, now in the form of superoxide, that is the redox molecule from converting, plant matter into energy in our body. That's where they come from. And what ASEA has done is said, well, we can break this down and we can electrolyze saline and create the same biochemistry molecules as a supplement, such that it will have the same effect inside the cell as if we created the redox molecules from exercise or fasting or taking herbs or whatever. And so we now can have a direct way of influencing those pathways. That's why we call this a biohack. That's just the way it goes. I'm looking in the chat room or in the chat, and someone says there's different types of redox signaling molecules. There are even in the body there are different redox signaling molecules. But I can lay to rest that we're not talking about 16. And I don't know, that started somewhere early on in ASEA. And it was also, said that or thought that there was a balanced formula of both reductants and oxidants, in ASEA. And that's not true. I can tell you that definitively. There are only oxidants. I'm not able to tell you which ones. You'd have to.
That was going to be my next question. I didn't know if superoxide dismutase was in there, or do we know, or you can't say.
Superoxide dismutase, or there are no antioxidants in there. There are no reductants in ASEA. I mean, that's just categorically they're not there. But the point of this is that what is in there helps provide an environment that directly induces the activation of the pathway genes that redox molecules that I make naturally also produce. And so this is all intertwined into the lifestyle idea that if I improve my lifestyle and do all the things that lifestyle demands, I will be causing my mitochondria to make more energy and more redox molecules natively. Plus, when I supplement and add more from an exogenous source as a supplement, I can manipulate, hack, create, induce, the environment in the cell that also activates those pathways. So I can do it on command, on demand now that way. Another question was, Oh yeah, what doesn't kill you does make you stronger. That's the hormesis principle. There's some people that say, well, that's the homeopathy, mechanism as well. And that may be true. To me, that's a little marginal, and that's fine. But the point of all this is when you understand the rules of the cell and understand that what we are doing is complying with, it's going in concert with, it's utilizing the native, natural, designed rules of the cell. This is how the cells work. This isn't magic. There's nothing magic about this. This is complying with these basic biochemical designed rules of the cell of when certain conditions exist. It's chemistry. And the reason why, when I can reduce my emotional, psychological stress and downregulate and control that, why do I get healthier? Because I'm controlling cortisol levels. There's physiology involved. It's not magic mental powers. I am not going to ever get in a spitting contest with somebody about that either. But I can explain the physiology associated with why, when I'm in a more calm, balanced state of living, why do I have less inflammation? And the answer is because I am not activating the inflammatory pathways, and instead I'm doing more to activate the cell protective pathways. And that has a lot to do with hormones and other signaling messengers like cortisol.
Does anyone else have questions? Or I just have a quick one. So we talked about the science. What do you see, or what are the benefits you're seeing on the business side with this technology? Or what is the potential that's there?
Okay, let's go there. I think I wrote a book on that one. So I had to get my head around it. That's how my head works. So we're sitting here in an environment with all this societal stuff going on that is not happy, and we're being pressed upon. So here's the two pivotal points. Just kind of come at this from a math. I talked just a moment ago about the rules of the cell. Let's just talk about rules of math. If you had $1 million sitting in a bank account, somehow it's just there and it's earning 6% interest. That means that it is spitting off, giving off, earning, $60,000 a year or $5,000 a month. That's what its passive ability is, okay, in terms of interest. So, and that's at 6%. So that means if I had 500,000 at 6%, that's 2,500 a month. I mean, it's just math, right? So the question is, how long is it going to take you, or would it take you or anybody? This is kind of hypothetical, but how long does it take to accumulate $1 million? I mean, you just kind of it's almost a rhetorical question. You think about the math. Think about your standard of living. Everybody knows how many dollars they spend a month, whatever it is. If you're living on, $60,000 a year, then you've got $5,000 a month with which to pay taxes and buy groceries and pay utilities. And it's like, what's left over? I mean, even let's just say if you had $500 a month left over, how long would it take you to accumulate and interest earn your way, compound your interest way to $1 million sitting in a bank account somewhere, right? And if you had $1,000 a month, if you could put $12,000 a year away, how long would it take for that to grow to be $1 million? My point in all this is that if you had $1 million, it represents something. It took a long time to get there, and by today's standards and laws, if you're doing this in a pension, you can't touch it for 20 or 30 years without penalty, right? You just keep socking it away, and it takes time. It takes time for that to compound its way to be $1 million. So what if you don't have $1 million, right? What if you don't have $500,000? What if you don't have but only $200,000. And you can go look this online and say, what's the average amount of savings for a 50-year-old in the United States? They'll give you a number, and that's fine. Let's say that it's $200,000, right? So now you kick in the next rule, and that's the rule of 72. So the rule of 72 is that whatever your interest rate is, you divide your interest rate into the number 72, and that tells you the number of years it takes for your money to double. So if you were getting 6% interest and you had $200,000, whatever, and I'm just going to say you're 45 years old. 72 divided by 6 is 12. So you're 45, that means at 56, your 200,000 is now 400,000. And at 60, what is that, 68, another 12 years of doubling, your 400,000 now becomes 800,000. So now 24 years later, you're now 68. You have $800,000, and you're thinking, wow, that's great. That's way more than I started with. But again, go back to the $1 million earning 6%, equation, and just say if you had 800, and I'm just going to give you the benefit of the doubt and say you were a smart investor and that grew to $1 million, right? At 24 years later, at now age 68 in this hypothetical scenario, at age 68, you have $1 million. The question is, 24 years from right now, given inflation and everything else going on with it, can you live on $5,000 a month 24 years from now? Is that your plan, right? And if you said, well, I'm just going to make it all be right now, could you live today on that $5,000 a month? And some can, some can't. Everybody's different. So think of this now with those two rules in place, the asset equivalency of what $1 million would represent, or whatever your number is, at a certain interest rate, and with the rule of 72 in mind, knowing how long it takes for something to grow in a compound interest savings account. Now compare that with what I call why it matters. Now we come back to this question that you're asking, because this is where it is relevant. Doing what you're doing now, how long will it take you to double your money or to grow your money to be whatever it needs to be to sustain your current lifestyle? Whatever that number is, you can do the math on it because it's just math. There's nothing right or wrong about it. It's a number. Well, most of the time, most people, in my experience, me included, is going to say that what I'm doing right now at the rate I'm doing it is not going to add up to be enough when I'm ready to retire to be able to support a lifestyle that I think I want or need, right? And you know that because you can just look at your current checkbook and you know what your lifestyle is. And if you want better than that, or you think you can make on less than that, well, then you factor that into the math and you've got your answers. But if I could do something, and this is why this is so exciting to me, if I could do something right now that within a year or 2 or 3, you pick the number, it's right or wrong based on your own assessment. But let's just say if in 2 or 3 years, you could create an income stream of $1,000 a month, and that's all it was. What is that the same as? And I'm talking about passive residual income. $1,000 at 6% or even 5%, I'm just going to give you a 5%, represents the same as having $250,000 sitting in an account earning 5%. So then you go back to the question and say, doing what you're doing now, how long would it take you to accumulate an extra $250,000 so that you could realize that $1,000 a month? Because we go $500 or $1,000 isn't all that much. It's not great, but it represents having saved $250,000. Does that make sense? So you say, well, what if it was only half that? What if I was earning $500 a month? Well, that's the same as $25,000 a month. Again, how long would it take you doing what you're doing right now with after-tax dollars to do $125,000 extra? because wherever that comes from, it's got to pass through a business filter of overhead or a personal taxation filter. It's got to go through a bucket. So it's not 125,000 or 250,000. I would have to earn an extra almost 500,000 to clear a net 250 if I could do it right now, you see, because it's going to throw you into a different tax bracket. And so my point is, doing what you're doing right now, you can't get there. I mean, not without something extraordinary, like you win the lottery or somebody rich in your family dies and you wind up with all of it. So that's why this, to me, I belabor that just a little bit because nobody gets this. There are not a few people. I didn't get this until Jim Glenn hammered it through my thick skull. You can read about that and why it matters, because I had arguments with him saying, no, I can do this. I can make it. If you have setbacks, you can figure this out, especially if you're in a high income thing. And he goes, no, you can't. It's impossible. If you're 45, it's too late. And I go, why? Because he said you can't double your money enough times between 45 and 68 for it to matter. And that's assuming that you're getting 6% interest. If you're only getting 3% interest, then it takes 24 years for it to double once. So you can start to see mathematically, there is no logical, rational way for you to get out of the predicaments you're in. And the fun part of this is anybody can do this. Anybody can do this. And when you look at it through that, it takes away, for me, I call it the chicken bone in my throat. It helps dissolve that, because you're going, I'm the smart one. I've found a way that I can generate an extra 500 a month, an extra 1,000 a month, an extra 2,000 a month from a silly little side hustle by helping people get healthy. That creates residual income that is the same as if I had done something else that put $500,000 or $1 million in a bank account, and I can do that in 2 or 3 years. It's the same as. I'm not saying, the financial disclosure here, we're not saying that you're going to go get $1 million. That's not what we're saying. We're saying it's an asset equivalency. It's the same as if you did that, because it's the power of residual passive income working for you. I hope that was not confusing.
Oh, I got it.
Yeah,
Awesome.
we got it. Well, does anybody else on our Zoom have, I know that we're at the top of the hour, so I know Dr. Lee has to go, he needs to go eat. So anybody else have any other questions? I know you put a few in the chat. We answered those. Does anybody have a question, want to raise their hand right now?
While that's happening, this question is, how long does it last? 3 hours. These we believe are rapidly absorbed in the mouth. That's why we advise, I parse mine into increments. 2-ounce cup, I do 3 or 4 sips from it until it's gone, and I hold it in my mouth. I rinse, I swish. I think it's doing very wonderful things from an oral health point of view at the same time. But I'm really just trying to maximize its absorption. Do not worry about whether or not you've got metal fillings or whatever. If you're worried about if you have a partial denture that's got metal, well, then take it out, but don't let the tail wag the dog here. Just get it in your mouth and start letting it absorb. And if your throat doesn't feel great, gargle with it. But just optimize the absorption. It's in there. It cascades through the body rapidly, and it's turning on and off these switches very rapidly with effect.
Just looking, I don't see any hands up, Doria. Any questions for anyone?
That means we answered everybody's questions. How about that?
That's awesome.
Amazing. Yeah. Well, thank you.
What all should they get?
Who was that? Oh,
I'm
thank
Marcel.
you. Go ahead, Marcel. Sorry.
I was wondering if someone has Alzheimer's, what all should they take of your product?
Okay, so we don't make any claims to treat, diagnose, or cure. That's the first thing I'll say to that. We can talk about neurodegeneration. That would be a safe way to describe that. When we have neurodegenerative disorders, they are almost caused by oxidation in neurons. Neurons, brain cells, have a lackluster ability to mount a robust antioxidant cell defense. Their They're the weaklings in the block, okay? And so that means they're really susceptible, and that's why they go so easily. They diminish in their ability to withstand oxidation quickly. And so the whole game is, well, what can I do to help my neurons, my brain cells, to start up these pathways that create glutathione and create the antioxidants that take care of the oxidation. That's the key. And that's lifestyle, and that's redox supplementation.
Dr. Ostler, how much are you and your wife taking at the moment?
My wife takes probably about 8 ounces a day, plus or minus, and I'm hovering between 6 and 8. Everybody has their own sweet spot. You know, when you get into these debates about dosage, and it's like you'll know, you'll find out. If you don't know where it's at, keep increasing it, and you'll just kind of you'll intuitively come to a place where you go, this feels right. I feel better.
I do see one question from Laverne.
Yes, hi, good night, everyone. I was invited by Lisa, and I asked a question. I no longer have a thyroid gland, dissolved with liquid iodine, and so I have to take a pill every day of my life. So taking this ACE, how would this affect or help me?
Did I understand the question of will this help with a specific
I
health?
don't have a thyroid gland anymore. It was destroyed by liquid iodine
Okay.
years ago, and so I have to take Synthroid or levothyroxide every day, early morning, 4 hours before I eat. So by using this product, how would this help me? It's grace that keeps you when you have to take a pill every day, if you understand. And so it's a struggle with the weight control and health, health wise. And so, how is this going to help me go forward? Is improve in health?
Well, a quick answer to that is, we sometimes kind of with our tongue in our cheek, we look at people and say, well, is there a cell involved? Well, if you don't have a thyroid gland, or if you don't have an adrenal gland, or, there's, well, then there's no cells there, right? They're not functioning.
Right.
They just don't exist. But with the idea, understanding the principle, the basic cell biology principles, you extrapolate and connect the dots. That's why the first book's called Connecting the Dots Between Redox Biology and Health, is because we don't have trials. We don't have, specific things that we've tested this for, and we wouldn't, because then we're a drug and we would cease to be a company. We wouldn't be involved in it. But the point is, if you have cells that are still there anywhere, yeah, it's going to make them work better, so you're better off. And this is transparent to medication, so it works well with whatever your problems are, whether it's thyroid, heart, or kidney, or whatever, bowel. It's going to be of help there, but it's not going to make your cells. It's not going to resurrect cells that don't exist or that are dead.
Exactly right.
So you keep using them. As intervention is okay. This isn't. We're not down on medical intervention. What we're trying to do is to prevent. We're trying to enhance the cell's ability to function well, so that perhaps we will need less intervention to make up the difference.
Understand. One more question. My mother is 82. She has ulcer, and I'm caring for her. She's getting actually has improved since I started caring for her, and the body healed. Holistic care, the natural food, and then so I was listening to you about the cells and oxidation, and it rings a bell. It's like a light bulb in my head, because one of the things for circulation, blood flow in the body properly makes the body heal. She's diabetic, and so keeping on a certain diet and all of that. So this sounds pretty interesting, as in with her wound healing. It's ulcers, or actually healing real fast. The doctor's impressed because of the care I've given her. But from what you share with this sounds pretty interesting because of what you're saying about the oxidation and how it works in the body and helps repair the cells in the body.
Well, I certainly think you have nothing to lose there. And I'll just say this about wound healing. Wound healing is a redox signaling event. That's what activates the cells. And the nice thing about, surface wounds, some of which you're describing, is that putting redox signaling molecules topically, whether you spray it or use the gel, can be very beneficial with regards to reducing bacterial loads and well as inducing cellular healing.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Any other questions anybody else has for Dr. Lee?
We appreciate this so much, Dr. Lee. It's been awesome.
My pleasure to be with you. I hope this was what you wanted, and it was fun to share and maybe take dip the toe a little deeper into some of the science and then pull back and see the broader view.
Yes, we
Absolutely.
appreciate that. So next week we have Masami and Bruce Hanloff. Masami is a retired massage therapist and her husband is a chiropractor. So that's who will be on Nurse Talk next Tuesday, same time, 7 p.m. Central and 8 p.m. Eastern.
Okay. If anyone has questions or anything that you've seen tonight, reach out to the people that invited you to the Zoom and get your questions answered. Or if you just happened upon it on Facebook or whatever, just reach out to one of us as well. So everyone have a great night. We will upload this with Dr. Ostler's permission to YouTube. That you should go to YouTube and search Redox Nurse Talk, and you should find it there tomorrow, possibly. I'm going to stop the recording.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ostler.
Thank